What we're going to do is have a short question and answer period at the end of the presentation, so you can hang on to some of your questions until the end. And also, just because we know you're so helpful and want to help put chairs away, the Denton Fourth Ward is going to have their party, so they've asked us not to put them back on the racks, but to actually just fold them and lean them against the wall. I'm going to turn the time over now to Sergeant Morrow, and since we have a good crowd, if you have questions, I'll run over to you with the mic, so raise your hand, okay?
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, Sister Buchanan. Well, I'm Bill Morrow. She gave kind of an introduction of me. Many of you know me. It's weird to have a microphone on. I'm usually plenty loud. So I don't mean to bust your ears out. I get excited about some of these topics. I do walk and pace, so you'll see some of that. I thank Derek, who's my clicker. He's helped me on a few of these. I've been at the police department, Louisville Police Department, for over 20 years, nearly 21 years. I've done a lot of things in that 20 years. 10 years of it's been on the street, 5 as an officer, 5 as a supervisor. And in the middle of all that, I was a detective for 10 years, working robberies, assaults, and homicides. And 17 of my 20 years, I've been a SWAT guy. And I'm currently in charge of the SWAT team. Last couple of years, I've had that. So I'm around this kind of stuff a lot, this kind of world, dealing with tactics, dealing with this kind of topic. This is a heavy topic. There's not a nice way to talk about it. There's not a delicate way and be effective. And I'm none of those things. Anybody that knows me, I'm not a delicate guy, and I don't go around. I just say how it is. So understand this though, nothing here is meant to offend anybody. It's not the Scare Straight program. That's not what this is. But some of the videos you see can be disturbing, and some of the topics we talk about will be disturbing. And if it's not disturbing, we need to have a different class. So we'll talk in a different way. But I've done this for a lot of years. I've taught active shooter. I call it active shooter. You're going to hear me refer to that, and that's what some of the flyers say. Really, it's active attacker, and I'll talk to a little bit by why we've kind of changed that name. But I'm an old school guy, so I kind of refer to that sometimes. I've taught this for 5 or 6 years. I generally teach police officers and firemen, and that's a week-long process, and we do that a lot. This is the civilian version, and it's good, and it's great stuff. So I've got a lot of stuff in my head, and trying to get it all out and without babbling too much up too many rabbit holes. I'll try to keep it straight. Most of what I'm teaching is from ALERT. ALERT is Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training. You can go Google ALERT, it'll get you a lot of information, some good stuff. This is specifically from them. I've had training with them. A lot of the videos you see and a lot of the people you see in there, I've been able to spend some time with them and talk with them and get a lot of information. Basically, it's a federally funded program to kind of deal with this kind of situation. And it's really good stuff, but it's much bigger than this topic. It's much bigger than the civilian response. It deals all with every kind of law enforcement. And so, I'm around this stuff a lot. What this isn't, I'm not a spokesman for our church and all those things. I have a lot of opinions. Most of you know I have lots of opinions and I have no trouble expressing them. That's not what this is about. This is not about what the policy of the church is and all of that. This falls in anywhere you go. It doesn't matter if you're at the movies, if you're at a restaurant, if you're walking the mall, you're outside walking through the park, you're at school, you're at church. All this will fit into that. So that's what this is about. Really, it's kind of empowering you guys to understand a little bit how police respond, but more so, you're only going to get a little piece of that. I could bore you for weeks on all that, but the reality is this is just kind of understand what you're going to feel, some of the stuff, how your mind's going to work, and how to push through and survive some of these things. And can you watch the news? Not every day you see another one out, another one out, another one out, right? We're seeing them constantly. So I'll talk about some of them. We're only hitting highlights is not a right word. We're only hitting a couple of ones that you may know about. There's a few that I'm going to talk about that you don't know about. They're not greatly in depth. I don't have time. I've had every one of these in-depth training on every one of them. I can give you the backstory on lots of them. There's so many more. There's so many more than this, as you know, and we're going to show some of that. And I'll try not to squirm off too far. All right, we're going to get going here, Derek. So when we talk about active attackers or active attack events, It's kind of hard to describe. The FBI and the federal definition is an individual that's actively murdering multiple people, some or more, and in some sort of where they can't get away or something like that. They have a very complicated answer what an active shooter might be or an active attacker. Alert comes with a much more broad one, and the reason is we basically call them mass murderers. Either they're trying or they're doing, but either way they're mass murderers. We study them in full. We study the whole gamut. We can learn just as much from those that are successful as those who try to be successful. So they're all studied in full. The trouble is it's hard to get hard and fast numbers because there's not a hard and fast definition and there's not really a good charting that the FBI does. It's tough, but I'll give you a lot. You see lots of them, and that's how we deal with them. We talked about definition. Keep going. So, I'll call it an active attacker. That's a better term. We used to call it active shooter. I'll use them back and forth, but just know that's really what I mean. And we're looking at attempted mass murders. That's what they're going for. That's what they're trying in any environment you are in. Here's the hard part. What's the profile of an active attacker? Well, it's hard to say. I'll give you some highlights here in a minute of some things we can look for, but they come in all different shapes, sizes, ages, and everything. Everything from young teens to upper 80s. Okay? I don't know, that's a large number, right? Mostly male, but not always. Mostly by themselves, but not always. And pretty much every major race and ethnicity in the United States has been a suspect for one of them. So it's kind of hard to pick a profile per se of what they do. They do all tend to have an avenger mindset. They're angry and upset about something. Whether correctly or incorrectly, they felt like they've been wronged. And they start turning to violence as their act out. But hard to say. Some broadcast it better than others. Some will go on social media right before they do it. Some are pretty open for years and then they finally act. But usually it's broadcast in some sort of way. Okay, Derek, give me another slide. Some risk factors, there are some. Are they all these? No. Are they just some of these? Probably. But we can talk in great depth about every one of these. But usually they have some sort of history of violence or components to violence of some sort in their history. The difference is most of us don't know the neighbor next to us, left or right, or sitting in church or sitting at the movie, know what the history of some of these violences beside them. And even some of the good friends that we don't know their history of violence. Exposure to violence, that can come in many forms, whether that's a military guy, whether that's growing up in an abusive home, whether that's an abusive relationship of some sort. It comes in a million different forms. Substance abuse and dependence is pretty common. And some form or fashion, there's some sort of abuse going on. Mental illness, well, clearly somebody who's committing mass murder is already there. But there is usually some history or something that's related to that. And that's a pretty common thing in our society right now. There's some form of mental illness. And this is the extreme ugly form. There's a lot of forms that many of us may suffer with. But there is usually some history of that with them. A history of suicide, kind of. Some of them might have that. All right, Derek, give me another. Certainly if they're stalking, harassing, or some of those things, that's pretty alarming and something we need to look at. But they're prone to be those kind of people. There are some negative family dynamics and no really good social structure there to help them out. They tend to be isolated and unstable. And we know that, especially when you look at the history of many of them. And a lot of them people already have kind of recognized as being a problem or a concern. And that's really what we want to touch on today. Will all these things be true? They won't. Well, some of them maybe. And sometimes we get blindsided, right? When you watch the news, you hear two things. The two things you always hear from everybody they interview. They were the nicest person they ever met. There's no way this could have ever happened. Or, they've always been screwed up. I'm just waiting for it to get. Those are two things we get. We don't really get any in-between ground. We don't ever know the closets of people's lives in reality. But when we do start to recognize and see some of these things that are a problem, we need to start acting a little bit. So if we can prevent it and start asking some questions or getting some help or reaching out, because many of the ones that were at least half of the ones we talk about today, or half of the numbers, it was somewhat preventable because there were people that saw, recognized, and felt something wasn't right. Give you one more click. So this is going to show you between 2000 and 2017 all the active attacks. It's already outdated. About the minute they build this, it becomes outdated. It'll show you the region. It'll show you where it's happening. They're in different colors. The yellow are guns, and that's the attack with guns. If you see a red one, it's an edged weapon. And if you see a blue one, it's a car. If it's a big dot, it's 4 or more injured. If it's a small dot, it's less than 4 injured. Again, we study all of them because we learn just as much from the successful ones as the less successful ones. Here's the real scary part. They're learning, and they tend to be adapting to the successes and failures of the ones before them. So we better learn how to adapt to try to counteract that, because they continue to work pretty hard at trying to get better at what they're doing, sadly. The number is pretty alarming when you look at it, and as you see, up until, I don't remember the exact date, but I think up to 2010 we were averaging, I think, 4 to 6 a year. Since 2010 we're getting close to 30 a year, so the number is quickly rising. We could talk for hours about what the social factors are and all the many different reasons, and we can argue about gun control, and we can argue about all these different things. But the reality is it's probably a combination of many of them, but the numbers are drastically going up. And why they're doing it, and some of the motivation and some of the stuff we'll talk about. 280 from 2000 to 2017. That number is already higher. In 2018 we've had plenty, and you've heard about many of them on the news. You don't hear about other ones, but you hear about many of them. And so that's really what I'll talk about. There are lots of these active attackers happening. So you need to have the mindset of not if it's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. And as crazy it is, some of the people that have experienced one have experienced more than one. Some of them have experienced several. And that's crazy to think about. But it's true. So that's how common it's becoming, sadly. Of course, they come in other forms. We deal with this one, where this was Halloween in 2017, and this guy rents a truck from Home Depot, a heavy-duty truck, and he is in Manhattan. He drives on the bike path, drives 17 blocks on the bike path, killing 8 people, wounding 15 other ones. That damage is when he came off the bike path and ran into a bus, which injured more people. And then he got out with a weapon in his hand. He was taken into custody shortly after that. Not just knives, not just guns, but even vehicles and sometimes explosives. We see this happening lots and lots. This is getting pretty close to home. We deal with Sutherland Springs. This is a bad deal on a church setting. And this guy actually went to a potluck dinner, I think, a couple days before. It wasn't really terribly known by the members, and he goes inside. He starts actually shooting outside and walks his way in, and then he starts shooting people there. A lot of people died. 27, I think, died in this one. Another 20 or 30 seriously injured. The luck, I say luck, maybe that's not the right word. There's nothing lucky about what happened there, but the good thing, there was a witness on the outside that went and got his gun and started shooting at the suspect, drawing him out of the house, out of the church, and he left. He was later taken into custody. But we're going to see everyone that I've talked about, the majority had the same response. The majority of the people that died had the same response, and it was not an effective one. And so we're going to talk about a chance of having a better response, so you have a better chance of surviving. Just a couple weeks ago, the Jewish synagogue getting attacked, right, and that gets pretty close to home again too. They had a lot of active shooter training, and a lot of them survived because of their training. And 8 or 9 dead, right, it was horrific, but not as much as 27, and not as bad as 50s, right? So the training is effective, and so we're going to talk about what you can and should be doing, and some of the battles and obstacles you're going to fight to get over some of the problems you're going to have in your head and some of the emotions you're going to struggle with, because that's the stuff you've got to push through and make it through. It basically comes down to this. Mass killers are looking for two things. This is really what they're going. If you're a mass murderer, you need two things to happen. One is you need a group of people. We just need a target. More targets, the better. So we pick these populated areas. Churches, malls, schools, you name it. There's a lot of people. That's what they're looking for. So they're looking for a number of targets. Easy targets preferably, right? Even though we've had some on military bases, those of you that are military people, the only people who carry actually any weapons are the military police, and so that's the part number 2. You can click maybe 2 clicks, I think it's going to talk about. How quick police arrive matters. So the longer it takes police to get there, and the more people to kill, that's really what they're looking for. Those are 2 factors we can play with. Here's the reality of it. A lot of these numbers, the shootings either has stopped before the police or stopped right after the police get there. There's a million reasons why that is. But one is sometimes the police engage with them. Sometimes they commit suicide. Sometimes they just play like they're a victim and jump in the crowd like we see at the Parkland School in Florida. We're starting to see that more often where the suspect now tries to play like they're a victim. We're seeing constant change in these suspects and these murders. But how quickly police arrive matter. And then target availability we talked about. Those are the things they're looking for. 3 minutes is the average time of police to arrive from your 911 call. Now, that is a very general number. It's probably different in Denton than it is in Decatur. And it's probably different when you're 10 miles outside of Decatur or Gainesville, right? Those numbers are very, very different and they're somewhat subjective. That said, an average is 3 minutes. That is the best response time in the world for police to arrive. It just is. There's no other country in the world that has a better police support than our nation. And I say that because I am one, but I'm proud of the guys I work with and the system that's set up. 3 minutes is a great response time. When there's an active shooting going on, how long is 3 minutes? It's forever, right? It's just forever. And so, this is what we need to work out. Police are going to come running in and try to help you. They will, I promise. But you got to help us buy some time. And that's really what we're trying to do, is get you to buy some time so the police can show up and do their job. And so we're going to empower you to kind of do that, to buy us some time. If you can make it to 3 minutes, we will come help. But there's only so much we can do when we're not here. So we can talk. We're going to talk very specifically about what your response probably could and should be to some of these. But I want to talk a little bit about the history of how we got from here to our 3 main things we're going to talk about. And there's a lady called Amanda Ripley who did a study on why some people survive these natural disasters and some don't. And she kind of deals with natural disaster side. Well, an active attacker would fall under a natural disaster kind of response, right? We're going to feel the same way in that tragedy. So she studied that, and alerts really jumped on that. Kind of a cool thing. So we start looking at the background of how people act in high-stress situations. There are 3 stages she came up with. Give me another click. They're going to talk about all 3, and we're going to talk pretty in-depth about this. First thing is denial. We all deny it's happening. Now, this isn't just because we're idiots. Some of us are more idiots than others. But the reality is, that's not really what this is about. The reality is what she calls normal biasing, and this is a real thing. And you guys can probably think of things in your life, I know I can in mine, where we see something like a natural disaster, but how often do we experience natural disasters? We just don't. And how are we? So when we start to see it, we take this information, and as our mind naturally tries to drop it to a pattern of normalcy. When we hear, you hear people get interviewed, an active shooter, and they were there. What do they say about the gunshots?
I thought it was a car backfiring.
Thought it was a car backfiring. Yes. What else do they say?
Fireworks.
Fireworks, firecrackers. So how many times have you been in church and you've been alarmed by somebody's car backfiring? Or how many times you've been sitting in church or at a movie and you said, well, this must be, time we've had firecrackers go off, right? That's not normal, but we also aren't normally having people shooting at us in those situations, so we put it to things we know and recognize. Our minds are really smart, and they build patterns, and that makes us really good at what we do. And I teach this to my officers a lot. We try to build patterns so we can get from point A to point B fast. And it's really good because the faster you recognize and understand, you can adapt to it. And there's great strength in that. But there is some danger in that because sometimes we miscalculate our math very well. And we aren't really good at getting the math right, so we jump to conclusions and we jump to these things. But our minds are trying to find a normal bias. They're trying to wrap their head around what's going on. And so we automatically downplay. So when there's a natural disaster, what do we assume people are going to do in a natural disaster? Run and scream and, oh my gosh, that really is not what happens. It eventually happens, and that's what we're going to talk about. But the very first thing happens is denial. We deny it's happening. We rationalize. Our brain's going, yeah, they're really not shooting at me. That's really not happening. There's no way that could be happening. And while we're sitting there debating that, we can't, there's a time lapse that happens there because we all go through it. I'm just going to teach you today to push through some of that. Because we got to push through while our brains are working. Because what happens next is part 2, is deliberation. This is decision-making time. And this is where we have to make a decision. The trouble is, when we're denying, we take a long time denying it, this bus is going to run me over. And while I'm debating the fact, the bus is still getting closer to running me over. And then I finally come to, I probably ought to do something. Well, now the bus is so close, I'm panicking because, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can do now to get out of the way of the bus. And I become a hood to the bus because I've taken too long in denial and my decision making is not very good, and that's where I've landed because I've never run the scenario in my head where this bus is going to run me over. And so we're going to talk about some of that today. But this is what she talks about in natural disasters, but we see it in critical incidents all the time. And the third one is this decisive moment. This is where we have to act. This is the time for us to move and do something. So the first one plays on the second one, plays on the third one. These three things are real. You're going to deny what you first see because that's what we do. Our brain does that. We just got to push through it. Then we have to make a decision. I will tell you this. When the poop hits the fan, decision making's gone. It just is. When you're in the middle of an active attacker, the time for decision making is already gone. There's no time for it. Between the stress and the time of what's happening. So the decision needs to be made today. The thoughts need to start getting in your head. We're going to talk about that. But when it all starts coming down the pipe, it's too late. So this is the time to start making some of those decisions of how we're going to act and what we're going to do. And then once we can get through 1 and 2 pretty fast, then we can go to our plan that we have put together. And then we can be effective. And so this is what her study showed. Her study showed that, hey, these three things are pretty prominent, and we'll give you some examples of them here in a minute, of what happens. But if we can get through 1 and 2 pretty quickly and get to our plan, our chance of survival has increased immensely. There's our denial, right? So, that's real life. Go ahead. Can't read that, but it's just a funny little joke about denying it. All right, I'm going to watch a video here in a minute. This is actually in London. This deals with social proof. This is the other side of it. We'll see how our volume works on it here in a minute. Don't click it yet. This is just a quick study to see how people respond. Sometimes we think, well, I'm not going to say what we think. That's not fair. Here's the reality. Generally, people work as groups. We just do. When nobody raises their hand, you don't want to be the one to raise it. When everybody raises their hand, you don't want to be the one that doesn't. That's what they're dealing with, the social proof. How many of you know, you get the question, everybody raise their hand, you want to be the one idiot going, I don't know the answer to that freaking question. I'm going to raise my hand to right. We don't want to be that person. And so that's the social proof of it. We're going to show some of that and how we can push through that. Because when we're dealing with an active threat or an active attacker, sometimes it just takes one person to make the right decision. And you can lead a crowd of people to great success and save them just by making a decision, not doing what everybody else is doing. You've got to go past that. So this is about a 4-minute video. We're going to play it. Get our volume right here. Go ahead and click it. I say, So what happens is my speaker disconnected. Stand by. My technical savvy, you just have to suffer through it. Sure. I had it working earlier. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Psychologists say no. Research
that'll help.
suggests that's often
Thank you. I'm winning here. Give me a sec. Just suffer through for a second. I apologize profusely. Alright, it'll really work this time, I promise. See? I know your faith now.
On this street in New York City, you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists think no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When
This
people
will
are in a
frustrate
crowd,
you.
it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill. How long before he gets help? Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is two conflicting rules. One is the rule we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help, and it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Four minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know that. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You alright? You alright?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
You wanna sit up? You alright, yeah? Sure.
First I thought she was dead. Then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm alright.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
While you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group. Everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill, and nobody helped him walking past, so I'd just like to check that he was okay.
And I thought it's wet, so you must really be ill because of the ruins.
One more. Go past it. All right, so we start seeing the group setting, and this is true. We've all experienced this to some degree. I think we've all had this inner fight sometimes when we see somebody in a situation, and it's always easier when somebody jumps in and then there's a crowd that helps. This is common and happens all the time. Now, we're not going to talk about why, in great depth of why, because there's some justification why we don't approach everybody in certain situations, and it's not always safe and all that. That's not what I'm getting at. Here's the point. The point is, when we're in the middle of a bad situation, one person can make a difference. That one gentleman who stopped to help, all of a sudden he had friends to help. The Good Samaritan stepped out, that it's easy to find other Good Samaritans, and that's the reality of it. So when we get involved in some of these active threats, it just takes one good decision maker, somebody whose plan can really make a difference for those that haven't. So that's the whole point I'm trying to make here. When it comes time to make a decision, that decision has to already be made. We already have to make some plans in our mind of what to do. We're going to show a couple more disturbing ones. That was a setup, but it wasn't. Here's the things I want you to think about. This gets really in the sciencey part of it and the brainiac part. They're going to talk about a human brain. They're going to talk about a lizard brain. Basically, our brain kind of cuts in half. And this is really true, right? There's a thinking part of our brain that we do a lot of thinking and reasoning. And then there's the emotional part of our brain. And both have an important role. Sometimes thinking is more important, sometimes the emotions are more important, and we juggle those back and forth depending on what we're doing. So it's going to talk about that. There are positives and negatives to each side of it. Our thinking brain is great. We can rationalize, we can reason, we can do all these things. We can override our emotional brain sometimes with our thinking brain. We can do that through training, through effort, through some of these things. We can do that, and it's important. It's smart. It can, those multi-level stuff, it's really good. Now, what's the downside? It's not really very fast. And sometimes, some of us that are so analytical, the world could be going on around us and we're solving world peace, right? You can't drive a car to save our soul, but I can solve world peace. So, there's some of that stuff that happens, right? Our thinking brain doesn't really function always really perfectly. But then there's the lizard side, or I call it animal brain. This is the emotional side. This has its positives and negatives too. The positives, it's fast. It's reactionary. When I slam a book on the ground and everybody goes like this, we jump, right? We're getting ready for the fight of some sort. We have no idea what we're fighting for, but we automatically react. We live off that, right? All the pranks that we play, we try to get people to jump and to scream, because we're playing off the emotional side of our brain. These automatic responses that people have. And so there's that. It's fast, it's kind of programmed, we don't have to think about it, it just happens. But the negative side is, when that's happening, nothing else is happening in our thinking part either. And because it's fast, it's not always effective, it's not always right, and we aren't always being very rational when we're dealing with that half, because it's just a rush of emotion. So under high stress, if we fall over to the animal part of our brain, the emotional side, it will override every thinking. And then if you think you can think at that point, you can't. You're overrun with emotion, you're overrun with fear, you're overrun with all these things that you're not even taking the information that's coming in and processing it properly in any form or fashion. Because emotionally, you're just traumatized. It's so hard to deal with. So click a bunch. I think I talked a lot through that. But the human brain, we deal with the fight or the flight or the freeze. We're going to talk about a lot of that here in a minute. We have to fight through that. And the lizard brain, I don't remember if it gives me some stuff under that. So let's talk about the stress response. These are some physiological things that happen to our bodies in stress. It truly happens, right? And you guys have all experienced this in some form or fashion. 60 beats a minute. You're on your couch, watching your favorite show, in your house, very comfortable. Everything's normal, you're secure, and life's great. That's 60 beats a minute. We control everything, all our emotions, all our thoughts, things are great. We get to yellow, 90 beats a minute. Something's alarming us. We've got somebody that, maybe we saw some movement in the backyard. I think I hear something. What's going on back there? I'm starting to get alarmed. My heartbeat starts going up. My fine motor skills start disappearing. They just start going away. Because I'm not alarmed, I got blood pumping and some other stuff happening. Red, somebody's rattling that back door. Now they're starting to push and pry on that back door. Things are pumping now. My heart's really going. I'm getting agitated. Things are happening. Blood is now pumping into my major muscles. I'm faster now than I've ever been. I'm stronger now than I was before my heart was beating. Those things are the positive things. Those things are happening. But my complex motor skills are starting to go away. Because the blood's not going to some of those, and the multi-level thinking is now going out the door because my blood and some of the stuff's going another direction. White. Well, they kicked in the back door, now they're there, and they're coming, and I see them. My heart's beating 150 beats per minute. This is the gray area. This is where it starts getting really bad. I've lost a lot of my motor function at all. Any complex stuff's happening. My ability to even think very well is now completely taken over by the emotion of what's happening. And then we have the black, 175 beats per minute. This is right before my heart explodes. This is where we faint. This is where we fall to the ground. This is where we lose our bowels. This is where we can't control any of our bladder, any of that stuff, right? This is where it's going all bad. And we don't want to be there. We don't want to be in black. We don't want to be in gray. Red has its advantages. But this is what starts happening as the stress hits. Trouble is, we go from white to black pretty quickly in some of these situations, right? Now we talk about these natural disasters. When we're stuck in denial, we go from 60 to 90 beats per minute, maybe even into the red. We're denying what's happening, but then we start to realize, wait a minute, this is really what it is. We jump up really fast. And so what happens when we're in the gray or in the black is our cognitive thinking is now kind of going away, our fine motor skills, and man, I was a great shot before all that happened, and I was a great thinker, and I was all this, and I'm none of that now. And I spent a lot of time with officers. We teach this a lot because we spend a lot of time dealing with training and how do we respond to stuff. The reality is this: almost every officer involved shooting, at least at the beginning part of the fight, they haven't aimed at one thing. There's not one officer who spent any time looking at a sight on a gun. It's, I'm pointing the gun at the threat and I'm pulling the trigger, because that's our response. It's a natural response. It's gone so bad, so fast, we're just reacting. So why do we train? Well, the training is hopefully that we'll fall back to our training, so we're not thinking anymore. We've programmed ourselves to react. I may not have perfect sights, but I've done this so many times that this is the only way. Without thinking, it just kind of happens. And I respond. And so that's why we do the training we do specifically. And I could get anything. I could do that. Any of my SWAT guys that I teach, any firefighter, anybody, we can train these responses. And that's what we're trying to do, is to overcome, because we don't think. We can't think. When an active attack happens, it's no time anymore to plan. Our planning and strategizing is going out the window. This is a great video. I'm going to show this a couple of times. What you don't see, off to the left, you'll see a video a little bit later that shows this guy walking in. This is in Paris. A lot of these are in Paris. Don't ask me why. Paris gets attacked all the time. That's a good video. But here's a guy who walks in with a rifle in the front left. He's kind of to the left of where they are, and starts shooting people. This is their reaction to that. A couple things I want you to notice, and we'll play it a couple times so you can see. There's going to be a lady with a stroller that rolls in here. I want you to watch what she's doing. And then we'll play it a couple more times, and I'll have you look up here and see what her plan is, see what his plan is, and eventually a lady with a stroller will come up here. I want you to see kind of what happens. Go ahead and play that, Derek. The shooting's happening. They're all freaking out. So, a lot of different things are going on here. Good, there's no noise to it, because all you're going to hear is popping and screaming. But what's the problem with the lady and the baby in the stroller?
Maybe we think the baby's stroller.
Okay. Well, maybe it could have been safe or not, but
It's lower. She raised her up where...
why is she trying to get the baby out? Yeah, she's just trying to get out of Dodge, right? And it's probably better without the stroller, but true, there could be some argument. What's the problem with her in the stroller? She couldn't get that buckle to save her, so why not? She's done that buckle 1 million times by that time. Why is she having such a struggle with it? Yeah, the stress, her motor skills, her cognitive thinking is all gone to pot. And understandably so. This is no fault of hers. It's just gone all crazy. And she's dragging. By the way, she never gets the buckle. She just ends up yanking the kid through the straps because they never get unbuckled. And she wins the war, and she does a great job, and they run away, and she's okay. But you start to see the fine motor skills take place. Play that one more time. You might have to back up. Just go back 2 slides and then play it forward. There you go. There's her response. And the lady behind her, what's her plan? Just wait it out, man. We're just overcome, right? We get into that gray and that black area and we just start shutting down. We just shut down. We've got to get out of that black area. I will say this, and I'll play it one more time. You can watch it. You watch the other guy fall down, and he actually gets collided by people running this way, and he falls down. Watch this lady a little bit, though. Play it one more time. She'll come on the bottom left corner, I think. Here she's struggling with the stroller. She stops, helps the gentleman up. Her head's still kind of in the game. Kind of impressive, really. And she's still coming up with a plan. We're going to start to see a lot of different things happening in here, but just so you know, we see this over and over and over again. Just everything starts shutting down. When you don't have a plan, you just revert to the fear. You revert to that animal brain, that lizard brain as they call it. Now here's a horrific one. You're going to see some video here, and I apologize, I'm not here to offend you. But it's kind of alarming, and it's tough to listen to and watch. This is a club, and 100 people die in this. And you guys probably remember, this made the news. It was a big thing. I think this club was in New Jersey. They have a band playing, and the band's playing up here on the stage, up here, and they got a pyrotechnics thing going on, and the pyrotechnics light on fire, and it starts burning. Well, somebody has some video of this as it happens. A couple things I want you to know. Here's the main entrance. This is where they came in. This is where they went into. And you're going to see, there was 450 people they estimated inside this when this happens. 100 of them die. Bad deal. This is just a bad deal. The red dots are all the exits of this place. This is how you get out of it. So we're going to watch a little bit of this. A couple things I want you to see here is how fast do they respond? Do they run in great fear at the beginning or not, right? Some of the stuff we talk about. You start seeing the danger, see what their response is, and then see what it turns into. One more click there. It's already on the ceiling, it's already burning. Nobody's reacting, nothing's really changing. Band gets it, band's now vacating out, people are starting to go. Smoke alarms, 30 seconds into it. Starting to get it. Then they start to kind of move towards an exit. It starts happening and it starts getting crazier and crazier. I will guarantee you this, every active event is going to be chaos. Get ready for it. It's going to be sheer chaos. The alarm's going, the smoke coming, everything else happening, the screaming, the pushing. There's going to be chaos. You've got to push your way through it. Give me a click. If you look at this, and this disturbing as this is all the circles are where the dead bodies were. There are 31 at the front door. They are packed like cordwood. What makes a group of that, I realize the front group kind of gets in the pickle and they kind of don't make a choice. What makes all the other people pile in on top of them? And then on top of them? And then on top of them? Panic. The reasonable part doesn't make sense that I can't get through there. If I try that, I'm going to die with them. all of a sudden our panic brain, our animal brain kicks in and we just react. And we start going, yeah, we're stronger, yeah, we're faster, but we're not thinking very well. And there was no plan. There just wasn't, not with them. Most of them, it's just you run the whole group of people kind of following. We got the social proof here. Everybody's doing it, so they're going there. Tragic. So we end up with 31 at the front door, 18 here, and 9 there, all kind of piled trying to get out the front door. We have other ones that they couldn't use that exit. I get it. That's where the fire was. The band probably used it. They aren't going to know probably about the exit behind the kitchen. I get that. But maybe I plan to go try. But how do we prevent some of these things? How do we prevent that tragedy?
Be aware of all the exits.
So that's the stuff that we're going to talk about. That's exactly right. We've got to start making these plans when we start walking in. Somewhere in our brain, we've got to go, how do I get out of here if it goes all bad? Now, I'm a proven pessimist. My family gets a kick out of me sometimes. They laugh at me. But I spent a whole life of tactically planning everything. That's what I do for a living. I've dealt with all the worst things you can deal with for 21 years, and it makes me somewhat of a pessimist. I apologize, but I'm kind of that guy. So in every restaurant, they know where I need to sit. They leave that spot. They know. Where at the theater, they know where I'm going to sit. Right? There's a few of you that do this. You just do this because they know that's how you're thinking. And you've got to. You've got to start thinking, well, how do I get out of here? If somebody comes in there, what am I doing? And I do that everywhere I go, and it's disturbing. It drives me crazy. But that's what I do. But you've got to. You've got to kind of know, I don't care if you walk into theater, we've had enough theater shootings, you probably got to know where the exits are, know where you're closest to. They talk about it every time you get on a plane. Well, you think about it every time you go to a restaurant. You think about it everywhere you're going, even outdoors. If somebody were to come here, where can I go? How can I handle this? Yeah, you aren't going to spend 4 hours studying this, but a couple minutes goes a long way when the poop hits the fan. Because there's no time to make a strategy plan there. We got to get past our emotional reaction, but if I don't have a plan, that just causes more stress, and it fails. So, come up with a plan, make a plan, and figure out where some of your exits are. Now, some of them actually went through the glass windows down here, which is not a bad plan. If you can't get out, they kicked out some of those windows and came out. But that's stuff we need to start thinking about, but you need to do it earlier rather than later, because when it's time to plan, when it's all going bad, you're not going to be able to do it. Give me a click. So there's a horrible picture of them piled up at the front door. Just a bad deal. And there's just nothing you can do. When you're pinched and crumped, there's just nothing you can do. And it's sad. So what can we do? We got to buy some time. Guys, we got to really, that's all we're trying to say. Your deal is you'll buy the 3 minutes you need to get officers there, but you've got to buy some time. And how you do that is by getting your thinking brain kicked back into gear. Because when panic starts coming, you're going to be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. You're going to, but you don't want that to overcome you. You don't want to be in the gray and the black. So you've got to come out of that gray and the black, at least temporarily, so you come up with it, get your brain working. You got to understand you're going to have fear that you almost can't control. You got to realize that, and then you're going to push through it, and just go, I got to push through it. So how do we do that? Well, how do you calm yourself? Just say calm down, right? That fixes it, right? No. But we've got to come up with some ideas. So breathing is a real thing. You guys hear about this when you go to your interview, right? Breathe deep. But it's true. The reality they call box breathing. There's a bunch of different things. 2 seconds in, hold it 2 seconds. 2 seconds out, hold it 2 seconds. 2 seconds in, hold it 2 seconds. 2 seconds out. That's box breathing. Do it a couple times, your heart rate's going to drop. It may get you from the black to the gray, it may get you from the gray to the red, but it can get this brain kicking. It's not a long-term solution, but it's a short-term one, and it gets you back down. So box breathing, control yourself, take a second. We'll talk about Lieutenant Murphy in a minute, who did that after being shot multiple times on a police response. Calm yourself, get your head back in it. Okay, I was told I'm going to have panic, I got to push through it, let me breathe and get back down there. Another thing you can do, fear is paralyzing. When we get so afraid, it paralyzes us. So breathing can help push you past that. Change that fear to anger. Now, you don't hear this in the church setting very often, but change your fear to anger. Because you control your anger a little bit better. And when you're fighting for your life, you're fighting for your life. And anger will help you do that. Fear doesn't. And you can control that anger a little bit, and the anger Anger is a little more purposeful than the fear who just freezes you to be a victim. Anger will allow you to fight through some of this. So shifting your emotion when you're so afraid, going, I'm fighting for my life, I'm fighting for my kid's life, I'm fighting for my wife's life, I'm fighting for my classmates' lives, change it to anger and get ready to fight it, because you'll help to control that a little bit. It'll buy you a little bit of time. Willpower goes a long way. It's not long term, but it goes a long way. So fight through it. The good thing about our thinking part of our brain is it can override a lot of the emotional animal instinct part of our brain. But we've got to fight through it with willpower. And it's not, like I said, it's not a long-term thing, but it will help us short-term. Stay fit, those things matter. Probably a lot of reasons, but staying fit, obviously our bodies work better and we can able to control it. Those things help. We tell officers this a lot. When you're in good shape, you handle stress better. You just do. The blood flows better. Everything's working better. But the real reason probably is it takes a lot of freaking willpower to go run a couple miles. Especially on days you don't want to, because whoever wants to run. And the reality is that to work out is not an easy thing. You've got to fight through willpower. And even if you like to work out, people that like to work out are always pushing themselves. So they push themselves more past where it hurts and past where it feels good. Willpower, they build up some strength in there. Willpower matters and it will help you. So staying fit is one of those things that helps push your willpower into a powerful situation. But nothing's better than scripting it or practicing it. And when I say script it, that's what I'm talking about in your brain. You got to start thinking about it now. How am I going to react to this? This is what I need to do. I'm sitting in the movie theater. I'm going to go out that door, and if somehow that's plugged, and that's my second round. How am I going to get my kids wrapped up to go? And hey, man, if we get separated, we're going to meet over here. Those are things that we can script in our minds already. Physically practicing them allows us to actually feel and really ingrain it in our brain. We always learn better when we're doing it. Right? Don't we all? So that stuff matters. Give me another click. Rick Corolla. I like him. What a great hero this guy is. I'm going to give you a quick little synopsis of Rick. You can give one more click. Rick was a teacher, and back in '85, he ends up being security for a couple big companies, Morgan Stanley and whatever combined they were, at the World Trade Center. And he was the head of security there. 1988, Pan Am airline that got blown up with explosives, those of you that remember that got him thinking, wow, that's a bad thing. I bet you terrorists will try to attack the World Trade Center. And if they do, they're probably going to set explosives off in the garage, because who wouldn't do it down in the parking garage? So he starts telling all the people, hey, we need to start preparing for this. And they go, yeah, we're not doing that. Well, we need to. This bad thing's going to happen. And, well, it costs money. It costs money to do all those things. So, understandably, a lot of them didn't do it. Well, I think it was '93 that the terrorists came and set off a bomb in the World Trade Center in the parking garage, which is underneath the World Trade Center. Well, he got some credibility now because he was speaking of stuff that made sense to them. And then, so he got frustrated though because he was trying to get them to move Morgan Stanley out of the World Trade Center. This is a target. This is a huge terrorist target. We need to get out of here. We need to go to other buildings. Well, they wouldn't do that. And his company took 22 floors, by the way, of the World Trade Center, the South Tower, tower number 2. It was 22 floors worth. That's how big their company was. The biggest company there, most floors there. He got frustrated with the first responders and the police there that deal with that. And so he started making them do fire drills to get them out of there. And so he would have surprise fire drills all the time. He would time them. Say if they're going too fast or too slow, he made them go 2 by 2. They would go line up in the stairwells. He would have them hike a couple of floors every time. And he was arduous about it. He kind of did all the time. And the bigwigs didn't like it because it took money away from them. I mean, they weren't working. They were busy doing fire drills. So he had some headbutting that happened. And then 9/11 happens. And the World Trade Center number 1 got hit. The North Tower first. Not their tower. Port Authority says over the loudspeaker, stay here. Stay in your seats. Stay in your cubicles. Don't get out. Well, he wasn't buying that, so he's like, yeah, no, we're doing a fire drill. Let's pack up, we're rolling. So they start their drill. He gets pretty much everybody his business out of there, by the way, because they were trained, they knew how to respond. And he was last seen on the 10th floor going up. And they said, "Where are you going?" "You need to get up to the high to make sure all my people are out." And that was the last he was seen. A few minutes later, Tower 2 came down. Because of his training and his arduous thing, those people all lived, and they wouldn't have if it wasn't for him. Training and practice matters. Another interesting fact about the World Trade Center that Amanda Ripley noticed, when the first tower got hit, people in that building, it took about 3 to 4 minutes for the lower floors to respond and react, to actually start evacuating. Interesting enough, though, the ones closer to the actual impact averaged 5 minutes before they started to react. So you start seeing the impact of these disasters. The closer we are, the more it impacts our denial and some of those things. The further away, they were able to react a little bit faster. I'm going to show you some more stuff that shows that. This next one is dealing, there's a movie on this, I have not seen the movie, but it's the Train to Paris, right? And we have the attacker on there, the suspect on there, on the train, has a rifle, AK-47, he has multiple pistols, he has a couple of knives, and he starts his attack. There are 5 people that made a huge difference there. First, one guy attacks him right away and gets the rifle away from the attacker. And the attacker pulls out a pistol and shoots him in the neck. He goes down. 3 Americans were on vacation together. They were buddies together. 2 of them were in the military. They were doing a vacation together. They hear the shot, the one that shot the guy in the neck. They immediately react. There are 3 buddies. They kind of get it. 2 of them had pretty good training as military guys, at least some hand-to-hand combat, and they just went to react. They run, they tackle him. They tackle the bad guy, and while one's tackling him, the other one's pulling the rifle. He keeps pulling out pistol after pistol. They keep pulling him away. He finally pulls out a knife, and he starts cutting. One guy has him in a chokehold, and he's choking with everything he's got. And this guy, the suspect, is cutting him. Cutting him in the arms, cutting him in the face, cutting him everywhere, and he ain't letting go for nothing. And he's fighting this guy until the guy actually passes out unconscious from the choke out, which was spectacular, while the other ones were pulling weapons away from him. This guy's not only, all 5 of them are heroes, by the way, because another guy jumps in to help. As soon as that guy passes out, the other 2 start tying him up. He jumps over and starts helping the guy who got shot in the throat. He is cut to heck, but he is down medically helping the other guy because he had some training in it. You start to see guys who had some training, had some planning, made a plan, and acted, and they saved how many lives? We never know, but they saved lots of them. Now, this wouldn't fall under the federal standard for the active attacker because 4 or less weren't injured, right? But we learned just as much from it. And this is them just talking about that. This is a quick little clip of them being honored for their service.
3 childhood friends were on a train bound for Paris when they heard a gunshot. Amid screams and commotion of the passengers, they quickly focused on a man wielding an AK-47. Almost instantly, one of them said, "Let's go," and the 3 ran toward the shooter.
My time's short. He just talks about the same thing I did and does it very quickly. I'm pushing through because I'm talking too much. We don't all know what gunshots sound like, and they sound different in every environment, in every setting, and everything. The reality is don't deny what you hear. Don't deny what you hear. Get through the denial. Get through deliberation. You should already have a plan in place. Get through those 2 and get to your action part. Those things matter. There's some other stuff I want to talk about, so, and if I get talking too long, we won't get to it. We got to stop playing dead. And we've seen that on already some of the videos, right? When we get to that black part of our heart, where it starts black or gray and black, right, where our heart beats so much we kind of lose all thought pattern, a lot of people default to acting and playing dead. Now, there may be a place for this, there might. I just don't want this to be your #1 strategy, because it's not very effective. All the mass killings I've talked about so far, most of them have played dead. Orlando shooting played dead. The Orlando Pulse Club, a lot of them just laid there on the floor, and they're just massacred. they're just massacred because there's the church shooting down in southern, what was it? Sutherland Springs, thank you. That one, they just huddled up in pews, kind of hiding in the pews. There's no hiding, it's just, you're just dying, and that's all it is, because our killers are just, they're shooting and they're shooting and they're shooting, and they want to make sure you're really dead. They don't care if you're playing dead or not, they're going to keep shooting. And stand to reason, being shot doesn't mean we're dying. Being shot more times, better chance of dying. So let's try not to get shot. Let's not try to get shot more than once, right? That's a good goal. We're all trying to live that life. That's where we all want to be. So that's what we're trying to do. Playing dead is not a good tactic or a primary strategy.
It's around 9:40 a.m.
Pause that.
I was sitting on
This is Christina Anderson. This is the Virginia Tech. We're going to talk about Virginia Tech here in a minute, but she was one of the students in Virginia Tech. I love Christina Anderson. She does a great job. It's one of my favorite videos. I spent some time with her. I've been through several of her seminars that are multiple hours long. She goes in great detail about what happened. She's going to tell you how effective playing dead is, and she's going to give it from her own words. I will say this is not critiquing what she did or any of the students that did it. This is just us learning from them. And I learned a lot from her as a first responder and how to respond because of some of the reactions she had and some of the conversations we've had. And we've changed and adapted how we respond as first responders. This is a quick little video of her talking about her being in Virginia Tech and getting shot.
We heard the first shots at around 9:40 a.m. I was sitting on the wall of the classroom, so in the hallway, and I could hear the shots getting closer and closer very quickly. I mean, there was only a few seconds between the first time we heard them and when he actually walked in. To me, it sounded like an axe being taken to a piece of wood.
So we hear that
our
in school,
teacher,
right?
she opened the door, and she peered outside, and she immediately shut the door, and she said, "Call 911." And right then, he walked in just seconds after. There's absolutely no time to think or to duck or to take cover. And people just kind of fell to the floor. And he immediately walked in shooting, and he went to the other side of the classroom, and he started going down the rows. He went down each row very quickly, very purposefully. And I remember thinking, your turn is coming. You're going to get shot. I mean, I didn't realize there was an active shot.
Kick me out again. Sorry.
That's a cute little girl, by the way.
That's my granddaughter. That's why you would think I have it by purpose. Hey, sorry. You get it set back up. We'll be fine. You think maybe I have it by design so I can brag about my granddaughter, right? That's the plan. But you notice, how does she describe the gunfire? Because that's a normal thing we hear, right? In our Latin class. I think she was actually in the Latin class. You know how to do it? No, we're going to go past the video because she didn't say much more in that video. And we're going to talk a lot more about that, her deal there. But calling 911, we need to call 911. But sometimes there's things we need to do before that. And this is one of them. There's some steps we need to do. If we're getting shot at, that's not the time to call 111, right? Probably have to run away or return fire or whatever we're capable of. Then there's a time to call 911. And so, hiding and hoping is not an effective strategy. It's just not. We've now eliminated all our resources on one thing. Hopefully it won't find us. We have no exits, we have no other options. There may be a place for this, but this should not be your primary strategy. It never is. Give me a click. Keep going. So these are the things we want you to study, and this is really your response. We've seen how people respond to natural disasters. We've talked about all these different things, but this is primarily what we talked about this a little bit. But these are the three things we really want you to be doing. We used to call it run, hide, fight all the time. That was pretty much what we did. It's been adjusted a little bit to avoid, deny, defend. All of them work, whatever helps you remember. There's some reasons. Avoid is better than just run. Not everybody can run. Everybody can't. Some people are in a wheelchair. You just can't. So, well, I can't do anything. No, we can still avoid it. We can avoid some of the stuff. So it's a better description. Hiding. Well, we talked about, the hope of just hiding and hoping and hiding. Hiding is different. Denying is different than just hiding. Let's get somewhere he can't get to. Denying is barricading ourselves in. If I have no exit, I'm barricading myself in. We're going to barricade in and make sure he can't get in or she can't get in. And then if it all goes bad, we're going to fight. Now, we can't say fight in school. We can't say fight in certain environments, so we say defend, because I guess we can say that. So that's why that word got changed. But run, hide, fight, avoid, deny, defend. That's what I want you to think about, because those are our responses. So anytime you get into these, I want you to think about, how can I avoid, deny, or defend, or run, hide, or fight? Those are the plans that you're going to build it on. That's what I want you to start thinking about. We're going to talk about each one of them. I'm going to play this video. It's a pretty quick one. You won't see much of it. There's a longer version of this. This is a school board meeting that's taking place. And what you don't see off screen is a guy walks in and he begins to paint a circle and a red V in spray paint on the wall. Would you call that alarming? That's a little alarming, right? I want you to see some of these people's reactions. You don't see it. You'll start hearing something in a minute, then it will pan over to him. We'll play this video. I want to see some of the reactions. At one point, he walks up. You'll see a pistol in his hand. He starts saying, all you people can go, the rest of you need to stay. See how long before they go. Because they don't just go like you think they should probably go. And then see what they do before they go. Because it's kind of interesting to watch. You're in a deadly situation, but they're going to maybe not just run away. And then I'll talk about the end of it here in a minute.
You notice it's on the sharpness you have there, and it's part of the plan we have at the workshop we're going to have following this meeting. This would be the first step in that whole process. Everybody in this room.
Everybody in this room except for who's at the counter, Ricky Rose. That was his word. He's already told him to go.
Hey, sir. John's just been talking. He's talking. John, go ahead.
Here comes a sneak attack in the back. No. She just collapsed. When her attack didn't happen, she kind of panicked and collapsed. Her heart rate went from the red to the black pretty fast, right? How long did it take those people who were told to leave? And then they took the time to grab all their stuff and, fix my hair and whatever else they need to do, right? It's time to go, it's time to go, right? That's the fun part. That's really the avoid part. Perfect timing. Get out of there. We can talk about the other stuff later. And then the other ones sit up there, and she comes in from the back. Now, you gotta appreciate somebody who's willing to fight, right? And that's pretty cool, pretty courageous. But just because we can doesn't mean we should. And just because we can and should doesn't mean we're capable. And hitting them with your purse, great little plan, it just wasn't very effective. And then really potentially could have been a tragic thing. The only person who dies in this, by the way, is the guy with the gun. He eventually kills himself. There is an officer, an off-duty officer, a school officer who's there. This happens, he runs out to his car, grabs his gun, comes back in. And at that time, this guy, I don't have the video of it, he spins around in the front, he starts just shooting at the president. The president falls down like he's dead. He never was hit, but he thought he was. And a lot of rounds come flying by him, so I kind of understand it. Again, heart rate up to gray black, everything collapses, the world goes bad. Officer shoots him, hits him twice, he falls down and shoots himself, finishes himself off. So the only person who dies is the bad guy. But we start to see these reactions. We're in denial. He's openly saying, hey, this is what's happening. And you should see it. The guy with a gun is pretty crazy, but we take a long time to push through the denial part. The officer recognizes it quickly, runs out, comes back, and deals with him pretty quickly. But that's his training kicking in. You don't see much of this on video. The president talks too much to him. So at first it's a good tactic, but then it kind of, don't start arguing with him. Probably not a great idea. He does, and then he starts getting shot at, and it's kind of crazy. But we just got to think about our plan. There is a time to fight. We just got to make sure we're able to capably do it. But if we can avoid, let's get out of there. Let's leave as soon as we can. We can leave our stuff behind. On 9/11, guys were turning their computers off. And the towers, they were gathering all their stuff, right? Because that's what we do. We just fall back into our normal stuff. So you got to get your brain to go, quit doing that crap. Let's just go. That's a good idea, just to go. My phone doesn't matter that much, right? Some of that stuff, we just need to get out of there. Know your exits. We talked about this earlier. Just kind of know where you're supposed to be going. Have that plan already in place. And then call 911 after some of that stuff's already in a place to do that. This is the guy, the earlier one that we watched that came in. Keep watching. He's gone in. That's what we should do. We run away when we can run away. That's the whole point of that video. We watched a couple people in there. We'll see a couple more videos from there. It's just time to run away. We can deal with some of that. Give me another clip. This is that same place, by the way, and there are two people hidden right here. This is the door they came in. What's the problem with that door? Why is it still open? There's actually stuff jammed in it. Well, they're not thinking anymore, right? They're just panicking and going. So this is where we got to start thinking. We got to push this. This is a good time to start picking up some of our breathing and thinking about what we're supposed to be doing. Look at some other exits. Give me 2 clicks. That's a door. That's a ladder. The door, actually, the video shows them trying to push the door. They just never push the emergency exit bar because they're not thinking very well. They're under panic. Their animal brain is taken over. They're not thinking. Pushing the emergency bar, probably not a bad idea. Just sitting there and hoping, because that's all they're doing. How about work on the door? How about climb a ladder? How about pile a bunch of junk in front of the door? How about we lock the door? How about we do all those things that we should do? Run, hide, fight, right? Avoid, deny, or defend. They've avoided, pretty good plan. Now they need to deny and defend while they're trying to figure out another way out. That's what I want you guys to start thinking about. There's different things that we can do. Deny, lock the door, lights out of sight. We teach this in schools a lot. If something's going on, lock the door, hide against the wall where they can't see you, turn the lights off. There are only 2 actually documented active shootings where the active shooter went through a locked door. They shot the glass beside the door and went in. Sandy Hook was one of them. Another one was up in Michigan. They actually broke the glass to get through the locked door. Sandy Hook was the very first entrance into the school, and that's how he got in. He shot through the glass to the left of the locked door and then went through. So locking is a big deal. It's prevented a lot of different things. Give me another click. Get out of sight if they can't see you. Barricade. Take all the stuff that you can and pile up in front of the door. Just try to do that. We're going to talk about Virginia Tech where that was effective in some of the rooms. Go ahead. And this is some of the stuff, right? Rather than sit there with hiding your face in your hands, which is understandable, we're under a lot of stress. How about we just start getting to work? Start doing some stuff. Let's start solving the problem rather than just hiding and hoping. Give me another click. Push a little faster because I'm talking too much. Simple door stops are great. They're very, very effective. We hate them as SWAT teams try to get in when people have those. All the complicated stuff that we struggle with, door stops are one of the hardest. They just are. Outward opening doors are a problem, and so when we're in there and it's not outward opening, we got to come up with other plans. This is talking about, hey, a couple of different things we can do. Take your belt off, wrap it around, hold it. Take your tie off if it's a church setting. Take your shirt off if you're a guy and use it. Strap it around, hold it tight. Just try to hold with all your might so it can't open out. If it's locked, it could be effective. It's an effective technique. There are stuff for those of you who own businesses that can allow some of that. Different locks and stuff out there. Click past this one because it never works anyway. She can talk about Sandy Hook, but that video never got a place. I never really know what it says after all these years of teaching. I still don't know what it teaches. But this is talking about the deny hide part, but it's also deals some with the next part when we're starting to deal with the fight part. Positioning in a room matters. If my doorway's here, it's better that I'm close to the doorway. Because if he's got a gun and I'm way back there in the back row, well, there's not much I can do back there. So I just become a great target and nothing better. So get up close to the door where you see these 2 gentlemen are. Get prepared, make a plan, talk to whoever you can talk to. You go high, I go low, right? That's an old college game we used to play. When somebody walked the door, you threw something up the high so they grab it, you could throw something down low. That's what we did all the time, right? Same game. we're just playing it serious. This is life or death. So we're going to do it. We'll talk about it. Get close to the door. If they come in and we can't stop them, then we're going to attack them. We're going to fight for our lives. We're going to fight for our children's lives. We're going to fight for our families' lives and our friends' lives. That's what we got to do. And there are no rules at this point, guys. We aren't playing by rules anymore. If a pen is effective in an eyeball, you stick it there. Right? If the chair up against their head is a great technique, take out whatever you got to do. Those are things. We're fighting for our lives. And you have a right to defend yourselves. You just have a right to defend yourselves. So take the right. Get ready to fight and fight with everything you got when it comes to fighting time. And shift your emotions from fear to anger. It will help you fight. This is another one we'll see. 2 things to watch. What his thinking plan is, and then watch up there what the next plan is for somebody else. Shooting's going on. Walk in the store, the shooting's going on. This is in Paris, that same store. He's coming up with a plan. Look at the lady. I say it's a lady, maybe it's a guy up in blue. That's a common reaction, guys. It just is. That's a common response. We don't know what to do. We have no plan, so we just go down and play dead. It happens a lot. He said, you know what? I don't have much, but I'll at least hit a champagne bottle over his head if I have to, right? It's a plan. We're coming up with something. Now he deferred off it, finally could get his way out, and never had to use it. This is not effective. It's just not. So don't use it as a primary plan because it doesn't work. We talk about willpower, talk about Lieutenant Murphy, and I'm not going to talk much about this. Lieutenant Brian Murphy was an officer who responded to a Sikh shooting just outside in Wisconsin, outside of Milwaukee. And he pulls up, he parks appropriately. There's some sort of weird call, shooting call. He parks appropriately, gets out of his car, sees 2 people in the parking lot that are down. He's going to help them. The shooter sees him, comes out of the business, and starts shooting at him. He takes 17 rounds. If you get shot, doesn't mean you're going to die. He got shot in the throat, you can see it. He, through pain and agony, crawls around the car, and still he hears other officers coming. Another officer way down the thing starts shooting at the bad guy with a rifle and takes him out. Just so you know, willpower goes a long way, and this is what he's thinking. Not today, not this way. I'm not letting my family down, my wife down, my kids down. I'm going to fight through this. I've seen there's a lot of great video here, disturbing but great training video. And him in the back seat of officers recovering him, and he still was in the fight then. It takes some willpower, but you can survive. And I will tell you this, if you know you've been shot, you're probably going to live. Most people that die don't know they were shot. If you go, dang, that hurts, I thought that would hurt more, or whatever you think. I've never been shot. But if you know you've been shot, you're probably going to live. So suck it up. You're going to live. Just going to suck for a little while, but you're going to live. So just some people think, oh, like the president who got shot at thought he died, so he fell over dead. And he never got shot. But the reality is, you get shot, you're probably going to live. I want to show you that a little bit with Virginia Tech. I'm talking fast so I can get there because Virginia Tech, I think, is next. Avoid, deny, defend. Just remember. Know your surroundings and do those things. What you do does matter. And as we talk about, what you do changes what the people around you do. Keep going. Click through all this. This is basically you need to try to avoid. You try to run. If you can't run, then you're going to barricade in. And when you barricade in, you're going to deny access to whatever you can to do that. And then if that fails, you're going to fight. And that's the whole chart. And when you get to just don't stop thinking. Keep fighting and going, okay, what can I do? Can I get out of here? Is there another way out of here? It's not a door. Can I make a door? Can I kick through that sheetrock wall because I know there's a door, exit door on the other side? I can kick through the sheetrock wall. And if there's a window to go through, I don't care. The church can afford to close the window. So throw a freaking chair through the window and go get out. That's okay to do. And a sister began and said, hey, we have some plans and some places you might want to go. But when you're the primary teacher and it starts going back, throw some stuff through the window and get your kids out and go wait in the cul-de-sac by the Teasley building because that's where you're supposed to go. Those are things we should be planning now in our head and start deciding. Virginia Tech. This is a horrible deal as well. And it happens in Norris Hall. The suspect had already killed a couple people in his dorm room. There was a huge police response to that. That was a little bit of his downfall if there was one. He shows up at Norris Hall. He changed the doors so nobody can come in. He changed all the exterior doors. Then one of the doors he put, there's a bomb if you cut this or something. Which didn't stop him, they cut it anyway. But he did all that, and then he goes up to the second floor, and he goes in and starts shooting people. This is a bad deal. This is where you saw Christine Anderson talking about the deal. Give me one click. Room 206 is where he goes in first. These poor people don't really have much of a chance, right? I mean, the door opens up, he just starts shooting. 93% of them are shot in that room, and 2 of those that were shot survived. 2 were not shot in that room. Kind of a bad deal. He leaves that room and goes to 207. He goes into 207, 86% of the people in there are shot. Half of them live through that, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. They didn't do much the first time of him coming in. There wasn't much reaction. Christina Anderson was in room 211. The attack happens very quickly, shoots a bunch of people, comes in here, shoots a bunch of people, moves over here. Christina Anderson's sitting right there. When she started talking about him going down, he comes in, shoots the teacher, comes down here and starts walking up and down the aisle, shooting them. And she was just waiting for her turn to die. That was her answer. I was just waiting for my turn to die. And she does. She gets shot. He leaves that room. He goes down the hallway. Give me a click. He goes down the hallway to 204. 204, the teacher, a Holocaust survivor, stands in front of the door and holds it closed. And yells at his kids to jump out the window. The windows they have to force open, and they're on the second floor, and they start jumping. He gets shot and killed, saving his students. One other student gets shot and killed. I think he was there to help, but I've heard some contradicting information, so I'm not sure if he was or wasn't, but he was up by the front, so it very well could have been. 4 other people get shot in that room, but they survive. He did something. He was actually, now they had some time, to their credit. He leaves that room, and he goes to room 205. They had already piled up every desk, every chair, and everything they could in front of that door. Then they laid down with their feet against it, and he couldn't get in. He shot through that door multiple times and hit one of them. They made a plan. Barricading in helps, guys. It just helps. They denied his access. He goes back up to room 207. They, the ones that were injured and the ones that weren't injured, barricaded that door, laid up with their feet against the door, and he couldn't get in. He tried. He pushed that door open about an inch, but couldn't get back in. He left. He went back up to 211. He was in room 211 3 different times. I suspect he was in room 206 multiple times, and he went in there. Christina Anderson got shot 3 times. He came in that room 3 times. He shot her twice at one time and one at another. She was hit multiple times. The video that got cut off was her talking about her playing dead and trying not to breathe so it looked like she was dead. It didn't matter. He still came through and shot her again. And then she talked about when the SWAT team comes in and they call blacks and yellows and reds, and that was their paramedic term. We don't use those terms in Louisville, but she didn't know what black meant until she looked at her classmate who was very dead. And they called her a yellow, but then they quickly changed it to red, and that alarmed her. She's like, what is he seeing on me that made it turn from a yellow to a red? Those are paramedic terms of different injury things. There's actually a picture of her getting carried out. Bad deal. I will tell you this. It's effective to run, hide, and fight. It's more effective to avoid, deny, and defend. Those are things, and this is a perfect example of it. Room 205, they had time, and they completely denied his access. This teacher, a Holocaust survivor, saved most of those kids because he was trying to avoid it. Room 207 saved the rest of those kids because the first time they didn't, but then they barricaded that door and he couldn't get in. It was effective. And then 211 was just a sad one. Keep clicking. That's all the stuff I talked about. When police arrive, I'm only going to talk about this for a minute, just to understand a couple of things. Police have one thing in motion. Like I said, you buy you 3 minutes, they're going to show up. Their job is to come in and stop the killing. Our training has changed completely. We run in and stop the killing. We run it by ourselves if we have to, and as many friends as we can find as police officers will come in to stop the killing. That's our job. Then we work on stopping the dying, and then we work on the rest. So understand, they have no idea the stuff that you already know being involved in this active shooter. We aren't going to have a great conversation about who should have a concealed weapon and who shouldn't and where we should bring them. Here's the reality of it. There have been probably many active shooter things stopped by those who carry weapons. Great. But there have been many of those people who got shot and killed by the police, because how would we know the difference? We're there at somebody shooting and we see somebody doing this, and they're shooting a bad guy or walking around with their gun, they're probably going to get shot. So we'll spend a whole other conversation some other time, but just understand, I'm not telling you whether you should pack or not pack. We're in Texas, for crying out loud. I'm not going to have that argument with you. The reality is there's a lot of things involved with that. So those of you that like to carry your weapons, more power to you. And just because you do some training doesn't mean you're really capable to handle the stress of what's going to happen. And we talk about motor skills and some of those other things. There's high issues that go with that. The church has pretty strict standards on don't bring a weapon. If you're a police officer, you can bring a weapon, but even if you're on duty or if you're off duty, maybe they didn't want you. I kind of get it. I kind of get the argument. I'm not here to have the philosophical debate. Just understand when the police come, they're going to try to stop the killing. That's what they're going to do. You might feel like you're getting treated a little bit like a suspect because you kind of are. Till we know otherwise, you kind of are. Suck it up a little bit. Sorry, we weren't going to be very nice. Our stress levels just peaked just like yours did. I don't know what you don't know. They may ask you some questions. They may ask you to move. It may go against your school or church or whatever policy. The reality is, have your hands where they can see them and just follow instructions. And they may not be very nice to you for a minute. That's never our intention, but they just might not. And you're thinking, well, the police are here. Why aren't they freaking nice to me? Because I just got, shot at by a bad guy. They'll be nice to you in a minute, but they really got to deal with some of the situation. You may be injured, and they're going to walk right past you. Your best friends all may be injured, and they're going to walk right past you. That's not our job yet. Our job is to stop the killing, then we'll come back. Now, every city does it a little differently. Louisville, we work hand in hand with our fire department, and this is changing nationwide. Denton's in this process, but I don't know how to the extent they're in. But every city does it a little differently. The reality is that we have police officers run in and stop the killing. We'll mark and call in, hey, we got injured here, injured there, while we try to stop the killing. If we think the killing has stopped either because we haven't heard anything for 10 or 15 minutes, or we think we found the shooter dead, or we got the shooter dead, then we will call warm zones and we'll bring fire department in under the guard of police officers to deal with that. The most injured get fixed first. This really sucks when it's a school, and this really sucks when they're little kids, and there's not a good way about any of it. But we have a plan, and just understand the police response is to stop the killing. Follow their commands, even if you don't understand them, even if you don't like them. Give me a couple clicks. I think, oh yeah, we already did that. Keep clicking me. We aren't going to show that. Keep clicking. That's him telling people what to do. Help yourself when you can. Get the stop bleed classes. Get to those kind of things. Do CPR, first aid people, tourniquet stuff. We use them like candy now in the police department. You guys carry them everywhere, right? 10 years ago, you didn't need tourniquet anything. Oh, everything's going to be bad with tourniquet. Well, all the wars we've had have proven that tourniquets are quite effective. You can wear them for a long time, and they're really great. And I'm not kidding you. My officers all carry them, and we hand them to our paramedics on a regular basis to help people. We've saved many lives with tourniquets that have nothing to do with active shooting. They're effective, but understand some of that stuff you guys got to help yourself. Buy some time. Help yourself deal with some of that. Keep going. This is just going to talk about it's going to be hard. It says Stop the Bleed program. Learn it, study it. It's going to be hard, guys. There's not a good way to get through any of this stuff. It's just get ready to deal with that. Those of you that are bosses, those of you that are leaders, understand that this is a long-term healing process for every bit of this after it happens. We don't name them. We don't name the, you haven't heard me say one name of the suspect here. That's a learned thing, and I agree with it 100%. I'm tired of the media that makes it this big fantasy thing and the coolest thing ever by naming them 1,000 times. You'll never hear Alert talk about their names. They're freaking cowards. They're monsters, and I don't want to remember them. So they can bite me. And I think all that social media stuff and all stuff that they want to be popular, whatever. They're worthless. And that's all they are is monsters. So I don't name them, and I won't name them. Sadly, I know their names better than I know any of the victims, because that's my crazy thing or what I studied. Give me. Do you know her name? Give me one more click. Victoria Soto. It's a shame we don't know her name. She's a teacher at Sandy Hook. She stood in front of her kids while the shooter killed her. She saved her kids. Give me another clip. They're the heroes. They're the ones we should know their names. Give me another clip. Angela. She was a PE teacher and a math teacher. active attacker came in, she tackled him, held him down until the police got there. That's a hero. Give me a click. I'm almost done, I promise. Give me another click. Yeah, give me all those. So this is just stuff. I'll give you a couple, because I've talked more than I even think I'm going to talk. So I'll give you 15 minutes if you have any questions, or we'll cut you out early. Just remember this. Active shooter events are going to happen. They're just going to happen. They're real and they happen. Our disaster response, we're all going to go through it. We're going to panic and we're going to deny for a minute. Then we got to make a deliberate decision of some sort. Then we got to act. So push your way through that. Push your way through the denial and already have a plan, and then push yourself to some sort of action. Avoid, deny, defend. Those are our plans. Avoid, denying, and defending. That's really what we're trying to do in all of these. In every environment that you go to, look for your exits, come up with a plan. If you can get out of Dodge, get out of Dodge. That's the greatest plan ever. We'll get some people in there to deal with them. If you can't, barricade yourself in so they can't get it, so they can't get in and deal with it. And then if we have to, all comes down to it, we just got to be ready to fight. We just got to be ready to fight. The Virginia Tech case study just proves that those techniques are effective. I will tell you the Jewish synagogue that got shot, some of those things already had taken place. We've seen this be effective. It's not the perfect world. Perfect thing would be stop them first. If you have somebody you're worried about, somebody that has some of those things, 50% of the people, 50% of these deaths, there was some preventable stuff before it that we know of. I think that's the end of my spiel. So there is me talking really fast. I could babble for a lot longer about other stuff and a lot more about this. It's kind of my little world. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And just so you know, I do this in church setting. As funny as it is, we did our third hour and second ward. I'm doing it for the third hour for fifth ward. No, I did it for fifth ward. I'm going to do it for second ward. And it's a 45-minute version of this. I talk as fast as I can. And I don't show any videos, and I don't let them talk. So many people sat through that. I just run fast. But if that fits in your environment, happy to do it. We can do it in a church setting, and we can do it in otherwise. It's kind of weird doing it at a time. Talk about this kind of stuff, but you know what? We're going to have a test. That's kind of where it might land. So that's me talking really fast with a lot of stuff. Any questions on my part? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So how do we prepare for seeing those signs and not denying? Because in most of our normal experience, if we don't hear gunshots, we're not expecting any of these things to happen. So how can we kind of get in that mindset where...
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I would just say start expecting that thing to happen, and then start getting your brain wrapped around it. And hopefully, if we plan well enough, it never happens and we're good, right? But start being a little bit pessimistic. Just going to be a lot, you don't have to be mean, but you can be a little bit more. Hey, if I go to this setting, if it went bad, start thinking about it. And I think you'll come up with solutions all by yourself. So then, when you've already done that for 30 seconds or 3 minutes, whatever, as you sat there at a dinner somewhere, you've come up with a little bit of a plan, and you've already, so then when you start hearing it, it's still going to take you a second, and then you go, wait a minute, here I am, I should be doing something. So the first thing is just recognize it's probably going to happen. At least plan for it to happen, and I think you can push through it. We're all going to get stuck there, myself included. I've been in critical instance where I've been every bit of that denial. I think I just try to push through it faster. So, good question. What else we got? Yes, ma'am?
Probably someone's going to disagree with it. I think this would be a good family building and training children. I think this would be a good family home evening where you're actually training your children. A lot of what we learned here today. I think practicing it and planning it and having an escape meeting place is good for fire drills and attacking and everything else.
You're right. And, we always did fire drills, right, when we were little kids and those kind of things.
Not always at home.
Right, and so those are things we need to plan and some of that stuff. And these are conversations we just kind of need to have, real conversations. That's for real. You're exactly right.
My kids' favorite family home evening was when they got to evacuate all their second-story bedrooms. So that was their most memorable one.
Yeah, but you're right. It's just, that's the part of this education, right? Is we kind of open our eyes a little bit more so we can see and maybe we can plan a little bit better. These are conversations we just need to have in any calling you have in our church or whatever, what responsibility you have. It's hard though, right? I have family spread all over the church. How quick am I going to be to run out? I tell you, I'm not going to run out, because I think you guys wouldn't like me much if it did. I think my kids always used to give me a hard time, like, man, why do you always wear a gun? Why do you always have a gun to work? Most people don't, I mean, to church, most people don't know that I carry a gun, but I keep it hidden, and never. And I used to not. When I was an officer the first 10 years, I didn't carry a gun hardly ever. But the more I sat there and thought about it, when it goes all bad, how many people are going to look at me and go, where were you? You know, and so I said, I can't live with that. I'm not going to attack it with a hymn book, or I'm going to attack it with something I got. But the reality is we got to face the real life of it and make a plan. Yes?
Does that work program, where would you go to learn how to jump out of a second-story window the most successfully?
Well, I don't know there's a great training on that. I think the natural instinct turns into survival. We do lots of stuff we don't think we can do. And when we're at the red level, right, our heart rate's pumping, we do lots of stuff, survival stuff. So I don't know if there's great training for that. There's a lot of survival. If you got the plan, I got to get out that window, and yeah, 2 floors it's going to bite, especially if I land on the cement on the bottom. But the reality is, I mean, how many saw the 9/11 people jumping out the windows? That wasn't a plan, by the way. You can't tell me that was their plan. There was no end to that plan that was successful. But the animal brain kicks in, and it's just survival. There's not rational. They're jumping hundreds of floors out, right? So I think our brain kicks in. If we have a plan, though, the alert won't talk a lot about that. Just try to come up with the best plan you can. There are better ways to drop and roll and do some of those things, but I'm not into training that so much. Some of it's just going to be survival. The survival mode. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there's just a book I wanted to recommend to everybody. I think it's really good. It kind of goes along with this stuff. It's called The Gift of Fear. I can't remember the name of the author. Gavin Becker. There we are. And it's called The Gift of Fear. I highly recommend it for mature audiences only. But I wanted to ask, sometimes if I'm driving somewhere or, and I see like maybe somebody with their hazards on pulled over, and I want to help, but maybe I'm by myself, or I don't know, is there anything I can do other than go, oh gosh, I wish I could do something?
That's always a side, right? And so when they did that social experiment, right, I get there's a side to that. And I wouldn't be terribly pleased if my wife had stopped at every abandoned car. It's really not what I want her to do. That said, we can do something. And even a quick phone call to the police or whatever, hey, there's the car broke down, maybe you can send somebody. Is a legitimate thing. But there are times we can't help, and then we debate it so long that we pass the chance to help. But that's a whole other class. I'm dealing with that. There are red flags and the alarms that we have, right? The gift of fear. He talks about this a lot in there, and it's a great thing, and we got to look at it as that. But we can get so afraid that we quit acting, and then we've got to be able to control some of those things. But being smart is being smart. And we can talk religiously in here about having the Spirit and guiding us and some of those things. That fits incredibly well here. There's just a time that we need to do some of that. Sometimes we don't. Contacting every bum that's passed out on the side of the road, probably not the greatest thing, or on the street. I don't recommend you do it. That doesn't mean you can't call for help. That doesn't mean you can't. My guys get paid 24/7. We go to every call. And some of the craziest calls you go to, you wouldn't believe. It has nothing to do with police. There's nothing. But we go because we call. So those kind of situations, you don't feel safe, that's okay. It's okay. And that gift of fear is a good thing. We call it conscience and the Spirit screaming at us and some of those things. It is a good thing. We just can't make that fear overcome us. And that's what we've got to be afraid of. But don't put yourself in unsafe situations. And don't feel guilty about not putting yourself in unsafe, because that's not what this is about at all. But you can call friends. Like in that experiment, it wouldn't hurt to stop somebody else. Hey, let's go check on that. Then you got the buddy for a program, right? We have the big burly guy going, hey, can you come here for a minute? I think we need to go approach them. There's some things we can do, but do it safely. I'm not here to tell you to be the good Samaritan and put yourself in danger, because I don't want to go there. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything that would be done differently if it's someone that comes to your home?
So that's a different thing. Not necessarily an active shooter, but kind of the same setting. Be prepared, and we got to plan some of those things. And whether you're capable to defend yourself with weapons or not is a whole other debate. But we got to plan for that kind of thing. How are we going to react to that? What are we going to do? we got to make a plan of some sort or other. Is it much different? No. Run, hide, fight still fits very well for that environment. Get out. Just get out. We'll call friends and we'll go and deal with them, but get out there. If we can get away, get away. And if we can't, we're trapped in a spot, then just barricade in and call for friends while we're avoiding their or denying their access to us. And if we have to fight, then we fight. So the same rules apply very effectively in that we have extreme legal rights to do all of the above in our homes, especially in Texas.
Situational awareness is the biggest thing in the church setting that we need to look at. So first class, 24 years, U.S. Army. I've been medevaced out of Iraq. I know what it feels like to be shot. He's totally right. You lose a lot of that. But once you get around that corner and you know that you've got to fire back, you're firing back. I didn't know I was bleeding until I looked down and I had blood dripping all over the floor on the desert street. Situational awareness is the key fact as you're coming into church.
That's hard now, right? Because we live on our phones and we're so in a little world, and it's hard to pay attention to what's going on around you. Right, but I'm guilty too of it. You know, I may be this honorable, pay attention to everything for a minute, but I lose track of what's going on as much as anybody else. Our phones and texting and Facebook and wonderful things keep us all occupied. Being aware of our surroundings matter. We didn't talk about it much, but when the stress comes, a couple things happen. One is tunnel vision. It shrinks down to there. It's real. It's happened in my life many a times, and it's just real. Our brain, we start seeing nothing else but what we're dealing with. Auditory exclusion, we don't hear very well anymore. Time dilation, everything slows down. Those things all start happening to us. They're real, and it's a big thing. So all that stuff happens, and the red flags and the warnings that we have are good, but just understand some of that stuff's going to happen.
So does the stopping and breathing help?
It does, absolutely. So that's the point we're trying to make, is when you got tunnel vision, you can't hear what's really happening. Time is now kind of all changed. All these things have taken place, and now we're going to make a rational decision and some plan, because we're not seeing, we're not hearing, so how are we going to make any good plan, right? So we've got to fight to get some of that back. So our breathing and fighting with willpower to get our brain back active will help us open that up to see more, to make some better decisions. But what will help most is having a plan before, so we can default to that. That will bring us some relief, and then we'll go to that action. That'll make some sense. I'll take one more question if we got it. Go ahead.
You mentioned your family kind of makes fun of you sometimes when you sit in a restaurant or movie theater, certain positions, but where is it you try and sit?
My back is never to a door or a window if it can be, and I want to see the entranceway as best I can, and that's just how it is. If I get the corner booth, that's great. When we walk up to a table, they all look at me, they all know, they can point out the seat every day of the week. Up Dad's sitting there, and they kind of laugh at it, but it's true, and now they do the same thing when I'm not around. My wife is a lot more alarmed to that. But yes, I just want to see as much as I can so I can make some of those decisions. And it helps me analyze what I'm seeing. As I'm sitting there ordering whatever, I'm looking around, and I look at all the people. I look at all you people too, and I'm like, oh, freaking, who's weird today? And I do that, and I do it in church, and I do it everywhere. I want to tell you this, it's so real, guys. You guys, most of you have no idea, actually, how close some of this stuff comes, and stuff I've dealt with police world in our churches, in our parking lots, with people with guns, with people with revenge problems. In my suit and tie, I can tell you felons that have come to church posing as investigators, and some really big investigators. And this stuff is real, and it's closer than what you think it is. And it's good that you don't know, and it's good that you can feel comfortable in church. That's great. But just so you know, it's closer than what you think, because I deal with it quite a bit. And some of my friends deal with it with me, because I say, come on, we got to go deal with somebody, and that's what we do. But it's real. My time's up, and I talked too long. I will stay here, though. I'll happily answer any questions you might have. I appreciate your attentiveness, and willing to listen to me babble.
I think it's totally appropriate because Dr. Morrow, big hand. So I got a question for you. Any takeaways? Is there something that you heard for the first time or learned that you never would have thought of? Share it with us. What? I see you shaking your head back there. Anything in particular?
I had no idea that we had so little time to recognize it. Last night we actually were at a place where there were fireworks, and I was hearing
Good, keep your ears open. How many of you count how many seats ahead of you or behind you on the plane to see where the exit is? That's vigilance, that's being situationally aware. And there are many little opportunities. How many of you know the address to your church building? The address to your church building. I would suggest you memorize it. When you go places, if you had to tell the 911 operator where you are, could you? Could your kids? Make it a game. Every time you go somewhere, have one child memorize the address, one child find all the exits, and one child pick where you're going to sit that Brother Morrow may be sitting at, you know? Anyway, thank you so much for attending. I hope you have learned something. I hope this gives you a little bit of comfort and perhaps knowing how to approach a situation, or not approach it, but actually get through it if you're ever involved in it. Sister Evans is going to give us a closing prayer, and then I hope you travel home safely and enjoy your holiday.